Ladies and gentlemen, boys and ghouls, it's time for Below Grade Level. Listener beware, you're in for a scare.
Welcome back to Below Grade Level, the show where we take the books that we loved as children and we read them as adults and ruin them. Last time we started reading Goosebumps number 2, Stay Out of the Basement by R.L. Stine. And we're going to continue reading that book for this episode. On this episode, we are reading chapters 9 through 15 of Stay Out of the Basement, and my guests are Bekah Eaton, Chris Zaleski, Annamarie Damron, and Patrick Anderson. This is a real fun one, and I don't remember a lot of what happens in the book. I remember how this book ends. That's kind of about it. I remember stuff that happens in the middle of it, and I remember how it ends. The main thing I do actually remember about this book, that it's called, this is like a theme. This is a bit of a theme for R.L. Stine and for at least these early Goosebumps books. We haven't gotten through a ton of them yet, but the name of the book is Stay Out of the Basement, and they really don't stay out of that goddamn basement. Like, the first thing that happened in that book was their dad saying, stay out of the basement. And it felt like every single chapter was, let's go back into that basement. Let's just head back down there. Why do we got to stay out of it? Let's live in the basement. So all they do is go into that basement. And there's plants also. There's plants. So anyway, chapters 9 through 15. Let's start it with chapter 9 of Stay Out of the Basement, Goosebumps number 2 by R.L. Stine. Take it away, me. Chapter 9 of Stay Out of the Basement by R.L. Stine. Good, it's okay, Dr. Brewer called. He bent down quickly, picked up the baseball cap, and replaced it on his head. A crow flew low overhead, cawing loudly. Caw!
This is written by Dr. Seuss.
Margaret raised her eyes to follow the bird, but the sight of the hideous leaves sprouting from her father's head wouldn't go away. Who gives a fuck about a crow?
Maybe she has ADD.
What? She's Mark.
Yeah.
Her whole head began to itch as she imagined what it must feel like to have leaves uncurling from your scalp. Just like puberty. It's okay. It's okay, really? Dr. Brewer repeated, hurrying over to them. Remember that we were doing Casey as a... What's that guy's name? Matthew McConaughey.
Who, what?
We forgot to do it last time we read, but the time before that when Monica was on, I only remembered because I was listening to that episode. We decided that Casey is Matthew McConaughey.
Oh, God.
I don't remember why. But I'm gonna do it. What does Matthew McConaughey sound like?
All right.
But Dad, your head, Casey stammered. He suddenly
Terrible.
looked very pale.
Dad, your head.
But Dad, your head. Margaret felt sick. She kept swallowing hard, trying to ride out the waves of nausea. Come here, you two, their father said softly, putting an arm around each of their shoulders. Let's sit down in the shade over there and have a talk. I spoke to your mom on the phone this morning. She told me you're upset about my work.
Your head. It's all green. Casey repeated.
I know, Dr. Brewer said,
smiling.
That's why I put on the cap. I didn't want you two to worry.
He led them to the shade of the tall hedges that ran along the garage, and they sat down on the grass.
I guess you two think your dad has gotten pretty weird, huh?
He stared into Margaret's eyes, feeling uncomfortable. She looked away. Calling frantically, the crow flew over again, heading in the other direction. Why is that even in the story? I hope it comes apparent.
Oh my
later.
God, I hope it lands and starts eating the leaves off his head.
Margaret, you haven't said a word, her father said, squeezing her hand tenderly between his.
Ew.
What's wrong?
He hasn't
What do
given
you want
any.
to say to me?
He hasn't given any explanation.
I know.
Just, I'm not weird. It's fine.
Don't
Come
worry.
hug Daddy.
Hold my hand.
Not
Don't
like-
worry.
Margaret sighed and still avoided her father's glance. Come on, tell us. Why do you have leaves growing out of your head? She asked bluntly.
It's a side effect, he told her, continuing to hold her hand.
Ew.
It's only temporary. It'll go away soon and my hair will grow back.
But how did it happen? Casey asked, staring at his father's Dodgers cap. A few green leaves poked out from under the brim.
Maybe you two would feel better if I explained what I'm trying to do down in the basement. Dr. Brewer said, shifting his weight and leaning back on his hands. That one.
I've been so wrapped up in my experiments, I haven't had much time to talk to you. You haven't had any time, Margaret corrected him. I'm sorry, he said, lowering his eyes. I really am, but this work I'm doing is so exciting and so difficult. Did you discover a new kind of plant? Casey asked, crossing his legs beneath him. Sorry, I'm not doing any voices.
I was about to
Sorry.
say, it sounds like
I'm sorry,
Matthew
everyone.
McConaughey's, like,
I'm
sitting right
sorry.
here.
She's tired.
And I would never do that anyway.
For those out there listening, Matthew McConaughey is Bekah's favorite actor.
Yep, he sure is. Wow, how did you do that?
Magic.
What are you gonna do? Did you finish it?
Yeah.
Oh.
How are you going to get the beer back out?
What are you gonna do when you want to drink the
God.
rest of it? Oh, sorry, go on.
Blah, blah. Huh? Casey exclaimed. Have you ever talked about DNA in school? Their father asked. They shook their heads.
Haven't they
Well,
seen
it's
Jurassic
pretty
Park?
complicated. Oh, this
Mr.
is
DNA.
really exciting.
From your blood.
From your blood.
It's a dinosaur.
Dino DNA.
Dino DNA. Maybe Matthew McConaughey played Mr. DNA. Matthew McConaughey DNA.
Oh my god.
Nope.
Dinosaur.
Let me try and
Dinosaur.
put it in simple terms, he said, fiddling with the bandage around his hand. Let's say we took a person who had a very high IQ.
I'm sorry,
you
can
know,
you read this
real
like
brain
Mr.
power.
DNA?
No. Like me, Casey interrupted. Casey, shut up, Margaret said edgily.
Ew.
A real brain, like
Bitch.
Casey, Dr. Brewer said agreeably. And let's say we are able to isolate the molecule or gene or tiny part of a gene that enabled the person to have such high intelligence. And then let's say we were able to transmit it into other brains. And then this brain power could be passed along from generation to generation. And lots of people would have a high IQ. Do you understand?
Boy, R.L. Stine really did his research on this
is
one.
very interesting.
It's a real Michael Crichton joint up in here.
It's like the Andromeda strain.
He looked first at Casey, then at Margaret. Yeah, kind of, Margaret lied. You take a good quality from one person and put it into other people, and then they have the good quality too,
Sounds like
and
a
they
Nazi.
pass it on to their children.
Oh, this is where they got the idea for Gattaca.
Oh. Very good, Dr. Brewer said, smiling for the first time in weeks. That's what a lot of botanists do with plants. They try to take the fruit-bearing building block from one plant and put it into another. Create a new plant that will bear... Oh my god. Create a new plant that will bear 5 times as much fruit, or 5 times as much grain, or vegetables. Get the idea. And that's what you're doing? Casey asked. Not exactly, their father said, lowering his voice. I'm doing something a little more unusual.
I'm fucking them.
I'm putting penises on them.
I'm giving them my best parts.
On them or in them?
Have you seen hentai? I'm doing that! The Japanese are funding me. I really don't want to go into detail now, but I'll tell you what I'm doing is to build a kind of plant that has never existed and could never exist. I'm trying to build a plant that's part animal. Why?
Plantable.
A plantimal. And a plant. Casey and Margaret stared at their father in surprise. Margaret was the first to speak. You mean you're taking cells from an animal and putting them into a plant? You mean you built a time machine out of a DeLorean? He nodded. He nodded. I really don't want to say any more. You two understand why this must be kept a secret from the government. He turned his eyes on Margaret, then Casey, studying their reactions for science.
How do you do it? Margaret asked, thinking hard about everything he had just told them.
How do you get these cells from the animals to the plant?
By fucking them!
I'm trying to do it by breaking them down electronically. He answered. I have 2 glass boobs connected by
Boobs?
a powerful
Boobs?
electron generator.
Glass boobs.
Boobs? Boobs.
Those would be terrible to touch.
You may have seen them
Clink.
when you were snooping around down there.
He made a sour face. Yeah, they look like phone booths. Casey said.
Alright,
One booth is a sender and one is a receiver.
Oh,
he
so it's the fly.
explained.
Yeah.
It's a fly.
I'm trying to send the right DNA, the right building blocks from one booth to the other. It's very delicate.
Didn't I say this the last time that
Yes.
it's just the fly?
And have you done it?
I've come very close.
Dr. Brewer said.
I bet he did.
So
A pleased
no.
smile crossing his face. The smile lasted only a few seconds. Then his expression thoughtful. He abruptly climbed to his feet.
Got to get back to work, he said quietly. See you 2 later.
He started walking across the lawn,
And
taking
then he
long
tootled
strides.
them with his hands.
Yeah.
Doodled.
Tootled.
But Dad, Margaret called after him. She and Casey climbed to their feet. Your head, the leaves. You didn't explain
What
it.
the fuck?
I'm gonna take a picture of my puppet army.
For posterity. Which page is it on?
The right one.
Yeah.
Excuse
Dr.
me.
Brewer shrugged. Nothing to explain, he said curtly. Just a side effect. He adjusted his Dodgers cap. Don't worry about it. It's only temporary. Just a side effect. Just a side effect. Then he hurried into the house. Just a side effect. Casey seemed really pleased by their dad's explanation of what was going on in the basement. Dad's doing really important work, he said, with unusual seriousness. But as Margaret made her way into the house, she found herself troubled by what her dad had said, and even more troubled by what he hadn't said. Margaret closed the door to her room and lay down on the bed to think about things, like her feelings. Her father hadn't really explained the leaves growing on his head. Just a side effect. Didn't explain much at all. I miss the circle of kids.
I know.
A side effect from what? What actually caused it? What made his hair fall out? When will his hair grow back? It was obvious that he hadn't wanted to discuss it with them. He had certainly hurried back to his basement after telling them it was just a side effect.
Jesus Christ.
I'm not kidding. Just fucking look at the next slide.
Wait. What- You
No.
just... Yeah,
I know.
Okay. Here's
I
how
just
the
said it.
Here's how the next page starts. A side effect. It made
New
Margaret
drinking game.
feel sick every time she thought about it. What must it feel like? Green leaves pushing up from your pores, uncurling against your head. Does it feel good? Yuck. Thinking about it made her itch all over. She knew she'd have hideous dreams tonight. She grabbed her pillow and hugged it over her stomach, wrapping her arms tightly around it, humping it a little. There were lots of other questions Casey and I should have asked, she decided. Like, why were the plants moaning down there? Why did some of them sound like they were breathing? Why did they...
Plantables.
It's under there.
What? What are you trying to grab?
I'm trying
to...
We gotta...
I remember.
It's a
It's
radio...
our scientific sound effect.
It's
for
our
the
radio
plants.
play. Wait, where'd it go?
Oh, did Bekah finally destroy it?
Oh, no, she didn't.
Now that I wish I had it.
It's our radio play. I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go back. There were lots of other questions Casey and I should have asked, you decided. Like, why were the plants moaning down there? Why did some of them sound like they were breathing? Why did the plant grab Casey? What animal was Dad using? Lots of questions. Not to mention the one Margaret wanted to ask. Most of all, why were you gulping down that disgusting plant food? But she couldn't ask that one. She couldn't let her dad know she'd been spying on him. Alright, I already said the moaning part. Jesus Christ. Sounds like an ambulance. She and Casey hadn't really asked any of the questions they'd wanted answered. They were just so pleased that their father had decided to sit down and talk with them, even for a few minutes.
Wow, that's damaged kid.
God damn, seriously. Well, at least he acknowledged us. His explanation was really interesting, and as far as it went, Margaret decided, and it was good to know that he was close to doing something truly amazing, something that would make him really famous.
But what about the rest of it? A frightening thought entered her mind. Could he have been lying to them? No, she quickly decided. No, Dad wouldn't lie to us. There are just some questions he hasn't answered yet. She was still thinking about all of these questions late that night. After dinner, after talking to Diane on the phone for an hour, after homework, after watching a little TV,
Oh my God.
after going to bed, and she was still puzzling over
Was
this.
she still thinking
This is
about
a
it?
dumb bitch right here.
Jesus Christ.
When she heard her father's soft footsteps coming up the carpeted stairs, she
Ew.
sat up in bed. A soft breeze fluttered the curtains across the room. She listened to her father's footsteps pass her room, heard him go into the bathroom, heard the water begin to run into the sink. I've got to ask him, she decided. Glancing at the clock, she saw that it was 2:30 in the morning, but she realized she was wide awake. I've got to ask him about the plant food. Otherwise, it will drive me crazy. I'll think about it and think about it and think about it. Every time I see him, I'll picture him standing over the sink, shoving handful after handful into his mouth.
She's just really obsessed.
There's got to be a simple explanation, she told herself, climbing out of bed. There's got to be a logical explanation, and I have to know it. She padded softly down the hall, a sliver of light escaping through the bathroom door, which was slightly ajar. Water still ran into the sink. She heard him cough, then heard him adjust the water. I have to know the answer, she thought, again, redundantly. I'll just ask him point blank. She stepped into the narrow triangle of light and peered into the bathroom. He was standing at the sink, leaning over it,
What if he was naked?
his chest bare, his shirt tossed behind him on the floor. He had put the baseball cap on the closed toilet lid, and the leaves covering his head shone brightly under the bathroom light. Margaret held her breath. The leaves were so green.
What?
So thick. There's a typo in this book.
Oh my God.
Geen.
Geen.
So green.
Geen.
He didn't notice her. He was concentrating on the bandage on his hand. Using a small scissors. That might be correct.
That's probably correct, but it sounds wrong.
Yeah, it does. He cut the bandage, then pulled it off. The hand was still bleeding, Margaret saw. Or was it?
Uh-oh.
What was that dripping from the cut on her father's hand?
Was it chlorophyll?
I don't know, Chris. I don't know.
Today we're going to learn about photosynthesis.
It was green.
Still holding her breath, she watched him wash it off carefully under the hot water. Then he examined it, his eyes narrowed in concentration. After washing, the cut continued to bleed. Margaret stared hard, trying to better focus her eyes. It couldn't be blood, could it? It couldn't be blood dripping into the sink. It was bright green! She gasped and... She gasped and started to run back to her room. The floor creaked under her footsteps. Who's there? Dr. Brewer cried. Margaret! Casey! He poked his head into the hallway as Margaret disappeared back into her room. He saw me, she realized, leaping into bed. He saw me, and now he's coming after me. Chapter 10. Stay out of the basement.
That was your summary? It was so loud.
Hey, well, it was super loud to... It
was loud for your
you.
benefit.
Thank you.
Okay. Margaret pulled the covers up to her chin. She realized she was trembling, her whole body shaking and chilled. Okay, have you been listening to us reading this, by the way?
Yes.
Okay, so you know about the adding and the adding content.
She was shaking.
She was shaking. Oh, shit.
Uh-uh.
Margaret realized she was trembling, her whole body shaking and chilled.
Margaret had her first orgasm.
She held her breath and listened. She could still hear her water splashing in the bathroom sink. But no footsteps. He isn't coming after me, she told herself, letting out a long, silent sigh. How could I have thought that? How could I have been so terrified of my own father? Terrified. It was the first time the word had crossed her mind. It was the first time the world had crossed her. But sitting there in bed, trembling so violently, holding onto the covers so hard, feeling so good, listening for his approaching footsteps,
so good?
Margaret realized that she was terrified of her own father. This is getting fucking heavy, this book. If only Mom were home, she thought.
Everyone's terrified of their father at some point when they're little.
Dads are scary.
Yeah, they go.
Without thinking, she reached for the phone. She had the idea in her head to call her mother, wake her up, and tell her to come home as fast as she could. Tell her something terrible was happening to Dad, that he was changing, that he was acting so weird and getting rapey. She glanced at the clock, 2:43, the normal raping time. No, she couldn't do that. Her poor mother was having such a terrible time in Tucson, trying to care for her sister.
As everyone knows, Tucson's the worst.
Margaret couldn't frighten her like that. Besides, what could she say? That Dad tried to rape her? How could she explain to her mother how she had become terrified of her own father? So that's the windows for this chapter. Is that
Shit got real.
just gonna repeat terrified of her own father over and over again.
Terrified.
Mrs. Brewer would just tell her to calm down. He's always been rapey. That her father still loved her. That he would never harm her.
The really sad thing is there are kids reading this who are going through hell.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what, yeah.
That he was just caught up in his work. Caught up. He had leaves growing out of his head. He was eating dirt, and his blood was green. Caught up. She heard the water in the sink shut off. She heard the bathroom light being clicked off. Then she heard her father
Click.
pad
That's a
slowly
loud
to his
click.
room at the end of the hall. Margaret relaxed a little, slid down in the bed, loosened her grip on the blankets. She closed her eyes and tried to clear her mind.
All these spooky sounds.
Oh, yeah. I'll put him in later. I'll put him in post.
Our producer sucks.
Margaret reached her hand down her pants. She tried
It's a
counting
whole new
sheep.
world.
She tried pressing 0 on the pink telephone. That never worked. She tried counting to 1,000.
How does that...
At 375 presses, she sat up. Her head throbbed.
Among other things.
Her mouth was as dry as cotton.
Ew, that's not good.
Oh, she said. She decided to go downstairs and get a drink of cold water from the refrigerator. I'm going to be a wreck tomorrow, she thought, making her way silently through the hall and down the stairs. Wait, it is tomorrow. She had never been so stoned more in her entire life. What am I gonna do? I've got to get to sleep. The kitchen floor creaked beneath her bare feet. The refrigerator motor clicked,
Click.
clicked,
There's a lot of
On-
clicking happening.
noisily,
Click.
startling her.
Huh.
I am fucking stoned as shit. Be cool. Be cool, she told herself. You've got to be cool. She had opened the refrigerator and was reaching in for the bottle of water when a hand grabbed her shoulder. She cried and dropped the open bottle onto the floor. Ice cold water puddled around her feet. She leapt back, but her feet were soaked. Casey, you scared me, she
Why is it
exclaimed.
always the little brother?
always
in
the
these
little brother.
books?
What are you doing up?
Okay, just so you know, we're reading Casey as Matthew McConaughey.
I don't know who that is.
What?
Oh my god, I'm
What?
sorry. Should I leave now?
Really?
Should I leave?
In
You
the
seem
middle-
dazed and confused,
In
right?
the middle of this reconnaissance,
No.
you don't know who Matthew McConaughey is?
Reconnaissance!
What are you doing up?
That sounds
don't
just
know.
like him.
Yeah, that's actually pretty good.
He replied, half asleep.
Matthew McConaughey sounds like a stoned Texan.
His blonde, flowing hair matted against his wet forehead.
That's a young child you're talking about.
I couldn't sleep. Help me mop this water. I didn't spill it, he said, backing slowly into her. And then away. You mop it up. You made me spill it, Margaret choked as she took another toke on her cigarette. Shrilly.
Cigarette in quotes.
Surely. She grabbed a roll of paper towels off the counter and handed him a wad of them. Come on, hurry. They both got down on their knees and by the light of the refrigerator began mopping up the cold water. I just keep thinking about things, Casey said, tossing a soaking wad of paper towel onto the counter. That's why I can't sleep. Me too, Margaret said, frowning. She started to say something else, but a sound from the hallway stopped her.
Click.
It was a plaintive cry, a moan filled with sadness.
A plaintive cry. Not guilty.
A plantive cry.
Plaintive.
Plantive.
Plantive? What do plants sound like?
You'll find out soon.
Oh, what do plants sound like?
I'm glad you asked.
Margaret gasped and stopped dabbing at the water. What was that? Casey's eyes filled with fear. They heard it again. Such a sad sound. Like a plea. A mournful plea. It's coming from the basement, Margaret said. Do you think it's a plant? Casey asked very quietly. Do you think it's one of Dad's plants? Margaret didn't answer. She crouched on her knees, not moving, just listening. Another moan. Softer this time. But just as mournful. I don't think Dad told us the truth, she told Casey, staring into his eyes. He looked pale and frightened in the dim refrigerator light. I don't think a tomato plant would make a sound like that.
Man, I love fart.
It's like he wrote this just for you. It's like he knew.
R.L. Stine was dreaming of this.
I never knew that would be so funny.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to let that one out.
Oh God, Margaret climbed to her feet, collected the wet clumps of paper towel, and deposited them in her panties. Then she closed the refrigerator door, covering the room in darkness. Her hand on Casey's shoulder, she guided him out of the kitchen and through the hall. They stopped at the basement door and listened. Silence now. Casey tried the door. It was locked. Another low moan, sounding very nearby now. It's so human, Casey whispered. It's so human. Margaret shuddered. What was going on in the basement? What was really going on? She led the way up the stairs and waited at her doorway until Casey was safely in his room. He gave her a wave, yawned silently, and closed the door behind him. A few seconds later, Margaret was back in her bed, the covers pulled up to her chin, despite Was
that really a typo?
No, it's me
Okay.
being stupid. Despite the warmth of the night and her body, her mouth was still achingly dry, she realized. She had never managed to get a drink. Somehow she drifted into a restless sleep. Her alarm went off at 7:30. She sat up and thought about school. Then she remembered there was no school for the next 2 days because some kind of teacher's conference. Oh my God.
That was her alarm.
Margaret, wake up.
I'm a Foley artist. She turned off the clock radio, slumped back onto her pillow, and tried to get back to sleep. But she was a lazy bitch. But she was awake now. Thoughts of the night before pouring back into her mind, flooding her with the fear she had felt just a few hours earlier. She stood up and stretched, and decided to go talk to her father, to confront him first thing, to ask all the questions she wanted to ask. If I don't, he'll disappear down to the basement, and I'll sit around thinking these frightening thoughts all day. She told herself, I'm not even having it. This is just great. I don't want to be terrified of my own father. That shit again. I don't. She pulled a light cotton robe over her pajamas, found her slippers in the cluttered closet, and stepped out into the hallway. It was hot and stuffy in the hall, almost suffocating. Pale, morning light filtered down from the skylight overhead. She stopped in front of Casey's room, wondering if she should wake him so that he could ask their father questions too.
What?
Let's go interview
Let's go
Dad.
ambush him.
No, she decided, the poor guy was up half the night. I'll let him sleep. Taking a deep breath, she walked the rest of the hall and stopped at her parents' bedroom. The door was open. Dad? No reply. Dad, are you up? You can't do both. That's madness.
She stepped into the room. Dad? He didn't seem to be there. The air in here was heavy and smelled strangely sour. The curtains were drawn. The bedclothes were rumpled and tossed down at the foot of the bed. Margaret took a few more steps towards the bed. Dad? No, she had missed him. He was probably already locked in his basement workroom, she realized unhappily. He must have gotten up very early and... Dun dun dun! What was that on the bed? Margaret clicked on the dresser lamp and stepped up towards the bed. Oh no, she cried, raising her hands to her face in horror. The bedsheet was covered in a thick layer of dirt. Clumps of dirt. Margaret clenched her asshole as she was terrified at what she saw. Not breathing, not moving.
Annamarie is trying to do all of this herself.
The dirt was black and appeared to be moist.
Ew.
And the dirt was moving. It can't be, Margaret thought, as she clenched her asshole even tighter in fear. Margaret couldn't help it. She always got gassy when she was afraid, and she was really, really scared. She leaned down to take a closer look at the layer of dirt.
No, the dirt wasn't moving. The dirt was filled with dozens of moving insects and long brown earthworms, all crawling through the wet black clumps that lined her father's bed.
Blurg. You read the...
Are we doing it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, we're gonna do another chapter? Oh, okay.
This is fun, right?
Yeah. I'm into it.
Casey didn't come downstairs until 10:30. Before his arrival, Margaret had made herself breakfast, managed to pull on jeans and a t-shirt, and had talked to Diane on the phone for half an hour.
Tell us more about your
And
morning.
had spent the rest of the time pacing back and forth in the living room, trying to decide what to do. Desperate to talk to her dad, she had banged a few times on the basement door, timidly at
random
first,
dudes.
and then loudly. But he,
12-year-old boy when I come over here.
but he either couldn't hear her or chose not to. He didn't respond. When Casey finally emerged, she poured him a tall glass of orange juice and led him out to the backyard to talk. It was a hazy day, the sky mostly yellow. Ew. Hi, that's not normal. The air already
Ew, yeah.
stifling hot, even though the sun was still hovering low over the hills.
Where do they live?
I don't know, another planet?
Mars. Oh, that's the twist.
Yeah.
Mars
Say.
Walking toward the block of green shade cast by the hedges, she told her brother about their dad's green blood and about the insect-filled dirt in his bed.
You know, whatever.
Chit-chat.
Casey stood open-mouthed, holding the glass of orange juice in front of him, untouched. He stared at Margaret and didn't say anything for a very long time. Finally, he set the orange juice down on the lawn and said, "What shall we do?" in a voice just above a whisper. Margaret shrugged. "I wish Mom would call." "Would you tell her everything?" Casey asked, shoving his hands deep into the pockets of his baggy shorts. "I guess," Margaret said. "I don't know if she'd believe, but it's so scary." Casey said, "I mean, he's our dad. We've known him our whole lives. I mean, I know," Margaret said, "but he's not the same. He's..."
That was so violent.
Margaret was really scared.
That's the best possible noise.
"Maybe he can explain it all," Casey said thoughtfully. "Maybe there's a good reason for everything. You know, I don't know what I'm doing anymore.
Sound like Hillary Swank.
Like the leaves on his head." I'm just gonna do that. "We asked him about that," Margaret reminded her brother. "Last chapter. He said it was just a side effect. Not much of an explanation." Casey nodded but didn't reply. "I told some of it to Diane, my lesbian friend," Margaret admitted. Casey looked up at her in surprise. "Well, I had to tell somebody," she snapped, edgily.
Diane thought I should call the police. Huh? Casey shook his head. Dad hasn't done anything wrong, has he? What would the police do? I know, Margaret replied. That's what I told Diane. But she said there's got to be some kind of law against being a bad scientist.
God, oh my God.
That just sounded like static.
I know, yeah, don't do it that close.
Ow.
It was just like...
Dad isn't
Scary
a
sound
mad
effects.
scientist. That's stupid. He's just... Just what, Margaret thought? What is he?
A plant.
A rapist. That's what he is. A few hours later, they were still in the backyard trying to figure out what to do when the kitchen door opened and their father called them to come in.
Oh my God.
It just...
Don't
that
do it.
is- you're mad with power over there.
Yeah.
Just so you know, when Aaron goes into the mic, it's just static.
And it hurts our ears.
And it hurts because we're wearing headphones.
Hurting their poor
If you're gonna do that, like aim it over here,
I
not
can't
like
imagine
directly
what
at the
he's
mic.
going through every time she
What
does
are you
it.
talking about?
With my newly found sense of hearing. Well,
just-
it's
she
being
knows
destroyed
sense of
now by
hearing.
Annamarie.
Alright. So, let's see. Where did I leave off? Alright,
Their dad
the
calling.
dad called out.
okay.
From a
Margaret
distance.
looked at Casey in surprise. I don't believe it. He came upstairs. Maybe we can talk to him. Casey said. They both raced into the kitchen. Dr. Brewer, his Dodgers cap in place, flashed them a smile as he set 2 soup bowls down the table. Hi, he said brightly. Lunchtime. Huh? You made lunch? I'm mixed up all my voices. Huh? You made lunch? Casey exclaimed, unable to conceal his astonishment. Dad, we've got to talk, Margaret said seriously. Afraid I don't have much time. Oh wait, he was supposed to be old man, whatchamacallit, right? Afraid I don't have much time, he said, avoiding her stare. Sit down, try this new dish. I want to see if you like it.
What are you doing?
I'm adding
You're gonna
easy
break-
access.
She did break it.
I did break it.
You broke the whoopee cushion?
She broke it.
Oh, that's not
Oh.
acceptable.
Doesn't do anything.
Oh, that just
You
sounded
can't
like
put a straw
air.
in it. It's defeating the way it works.
Annamarie grew up without whoopee cushions. This is her first experience with one.
I don't remember now.
He's too distraught about the whoopee cushion.
Is it okay?
I think it's
It's
okay.
okay.
Will it be okay?
Yeah.
It's okay. It's
We'll
okay.
just have to go back to Deep Creek and go to
Margaret
the
and
arcade win
Casey
another
Where
one.
can we
Obedient-
find another whoopee cushion?
That thing cost like 700 tickets.
Oh, God. Oh, no.
We pulled all our tickets together to get that.
Well.
What's
She
that,
wasn't
boy?
happy about it.
I was not.
Annamarie
I wanted
hurt
us
you?
all to get friendship bracelets.
Oh.
Annamarie did what?
Me and Joe got friendship
I'm sorry.
bracelets.
I'm sorry, Whoopi. Will you forgive me? Yes? Come here, Whoopee Cushion. Let me blow you up. What happened?
I don't know.
We broke a glass.
A ghost!
Ugh. Speaking of spooky things, Margaret and Casey obediently took their places at the table. What is this stuff? Casey cried, not using his normal voice. He was shocked. The 2 bowls were filled with a green, pulpy substance. It looks like green mashed potatoes, said Casey, still shocked and not using his normal voice, and making a face. It's something different, said Dr. Brewer, mysteriously, standing over them at the head of the table. Go ahead, taste it.
Ew.
I'll bet you'll be surprised.
Ew.
Dad, you've never made lunch for us before. Lunch already. Margaret said.
Where's
I was
the
really
learning gone,
confused
Bob?
about that.
Lunch already?
Trying to keep the suspicion out of her voice. I just wanted you to try this, he said, his smile fading. You're my guinea pigs.
What? Is that what it says?
Yes.
That's weird.
You're my guinea pigs. We have some things we want to ask you, Margaret said, lifting her spoon, but not eating the green mess in front of her.
He's trying to turn them.
Probably.
Your mother called this morning, her father said. When? Margaret asked eagerly. Just a short while ago. I guess you're outside and didn't hear the phone ringing. What did you say? Casey asked, staring down at the bowl in front of him. Aunt Eleanor's doing better. She's been moved out of intensive care. Your mom may be able to come home soon.
Yay.
Yay!
Yay, Mom.
Great, Margaret said. I mean, Margaret and Casey cried in unison.
Said Lumpy Space Princess.
Eat, Dr. Brewer instructed, pointing to the bowls. Aren't you going to have some? Casey asked, rolling his spoon around in his fingers.
What?
Rolling his spoon around in his fingers.
You know,
Like
what
a
kids
badass,
do.
yeah.
No, their father replied quickly. I already ate. He leaned with both hands against the tabletop. Margaret saw that his cut hand was freshly bandaged. Dad, last night, she started, but he cut her off. Eat, will you try it? But what is it? Casey demanded, whining. It doesn't smell too good. I think you'll like the taste, Dr. Brewer insisted impatiently.
God.
It should taste very sweet.
What a pusher.
He stared at them, urging them to eat the green stuff.
Don't eat it.
Don't eat it.
Don't eat
Don't
it.
eat it.
Don't eat it.
Staring into the
Obviously.
bowl at the mysterious substance, Margaret was suddenly frozen with fear. He's too eager for us to eat this, she thought, glancing up at her brother.
No shit.
He's too desperate. He's never made lunch before. Why did he make this? And why won't he tell us what it is? What's going on here? She wondered.
Oh my god.
And Casey's expression revealed that he was wondering the same thing. Is Dad trying to do something to us? Is this green stuff going to change us or hurt
Don't
us?
eat it.
Or make us grow leaves too?
Oh.
What crazy thoughts, Margaret realized. But she also realized that she was terrified of whatever the stuff was he was trying to feed them. Just like she was terrified of her father. Terrified
Of her father.
of her father. What's the matter with you two? Their father cried impatiently. He raised his hands in an eating gesture. Pick up your spoons! Come on! What are you waiting for? Come on! Margaret and Casey raised their spoons and dropped them into the soft green substance, splork. But they didn't raise the spoons to their mouths. They couldn't. Eat! Eat! Dr. Brewer screamed, pounding the table with his good hand. What are you waiting for? Eat your lunch. Go ahead and eat it. Eat. He's giving us no choice, Margaret thought. Her hand was trembling as she reluctantly raised the spoon to her mouth. What, another one?
That's the end of the chapter.
It's the end of the chapter. What's your votes?
I don't know. I want to know what happens.
I do too. How
Oh,
long?
man.
Oh, this one's really short. All right,
Okay.
there you go.
Jesus.
Super short.
They probably could have kept that the same chapter,
Yeah.
Chapter.
Especially, like,
since they're in the middle
We're
of
going for
th-
3
this
chapters.
is like an editor going in, like, oh, by the way, chapter 11, you should probably split it into 2 chapters.
It's a little bit too intense. I think the
Right
young
here.
ones aren't going
Let's
to be able
make
to
sure we
handle
have
it.
13 chapters. That's creepier. Kids will be into it. Split this one. Yeah, 13.
Go ahead, you'll like it, Dr. Brewer insisted, leaning over the table. Casey watched as Margaret raised the spoon to her lips. The doorbell rang. Who could that be? Dr. Brewer asked, very annoyed at the interruption. I'll be right back, kids. He lumbered out to the front hall.
Thought delivery.
Saved by the bell, Margaret said, dropping the spoon into the bowl with a sickening plop.
I got your
She
thoughts
said,
right
saved
here.
by the bell. This stuff is disgusting, Casey whispered. Some kind of plant food or something. Yuck. Quick, Margaret said, jumping up and grabbing the 2 bowls. Help me. All right. They rushed to the sink, pulled out the wastebasket, and scooped the contents of both bowls into the garbage.
Glorp.
Then they carried both bowls back to the table and set them down beside the spoons.
What's that noise? Oh.
Go see who's at the door, Casey said. They crept into the hall in time to see a man carrying a black briefcase step into the front entrance and greet their father with a short fart.
Thought delivery. Got your box of thoughts right here, on time.
The man had a tan, bald head and was wearing large, blue lens glasses. He had a brown mustache and was wearing a navy blue shirt with red and white striped tie.
They're very
What a
observant.
lot of interesting colors.
It's Waldo.
Mr. Martinez! Their father exclaimed, "What a surprise!" Dad's old boss from Polytech, Margaret whispered to Casey. I know, Casey replied peevishly.
No, McConaughey, not Keanu Reeves.
I don't know. I said weeks ago. Oh, wait. I said weeks ago I'd come and check up on how your work is coming along, Martina said, sniffing the air for some reason. Wellington gave me a lift. My car's in the garage for a change. Wellington is my chauffeur. Yeah, you know. Well, I'm really not ready, Dr. Brewer stammered. I'm really not ready. He stammered. Looking very uncomfortable even from Margaret's vantage point behind him. I wasn't expecting anyone. I mean, I don't think this is a good time.
Dr. Brewer had a stroke.
No problem. I'll just have a quick look, Martina said, putting a hand on Brewer's shoulder, as if to calm him. I've always been interested in your work. You know that. And you know that it wasn't my idea to let you go. The board forced me. They gave me no choice, Mr. Brewer.
Mr. Brewer.
He calls his former employee Mr. Brewer.
But, I'm not giving up on you. I promise you that. Come on, let's see what kind of progress you're making.
Is that like the Hudsucker proxy? Is that what you're doing?
I don't know any of these references you're making.
Mr. Martinez sure
is
sounds like a
me.
1920
This
salesman.
is the real me.
Well,
It's
Dr. Brewer couldn't hide his displeasure at Mr. Martinez's surprise appearance.
It was showing through his pants.
You mean his pleasure.
You mean his plants.
Plants.
Plant
His
Plant
pleasure
pants.
was
Plant
showing
pants.
through his plants.
Plants.
I did once for a
Wait,
summer
wait.
only called my pants bananas and my shorts plantains. I don't know why.
Jesus Christ.
That's weird.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Anatomy.
Tell me about it.
he scowled and tried to block the path to the basement steps. At least, it seemed that way to Margaret, who watched silently beside her brother. Mr. Martinez stepped past... I always get all the exposition. Mr. Martinez stepped past Dr. Brewer and pulled open the basement door. Hi, guys! Mr. Martinez gave the two kids a wave, hoisting his briefcase as if it weighed 2 tons. Their father looked surprised to see them there. Did you kids finish your lunch? Yeah, it was pretty good, Casey lied. The answer seemed to please Dr. Brewer. Adjusting the brim of his Dodgers cap, he carefully... He followed Mr. Martinez to the basement, carefully closing and locking the door behind him.
Did it say anything about his Dodgers cap, or did you just make that up?
No, it's a Dodgers cap.
Oh.
I just can't read.
Why would you think that needless detail wouldn't be in there?
I don't know. I was confused.
Or else Stine got a kickback from the Dodgers.
Yeah.
We'll give you 20
That's some
grand.
window.
I gotta write Dodgers in here 50 times.
They're my sponsor.
But that's okay. Maybe he'll give Dad his job back, Casey said, walking back to the kitchen. He pulled open the refrigerator to look for something for lunch. Don't be stupid, Margaret said, reaching over him to pull out a container of egg salad.
Ew.
Ew. I'd rather eat the green shit.
Yeah. If Dad really is growing plants that are part animal, he'll be famous. He won't need a job. Yeah, I guess, Casey said thoughtfully. Is that all there is? Just egg salad? He shares our feelings about egg salad.
They opened the egg salad container.
And that's what it smelled like.
I'll make you a sandwich, Margaret offered. I'm not really hungry, Casey replied. That green stuff made me sick. Why do you think he wanted us to eat it? I don't know, Margaret said. She put a hand on Casey's slender, delicate shoulder.
Whoa.
I'm really scared, Casey. I wish Mom were home.
Her tight asshole.
So scared I'm farting. Me too, he said quietly. Margaret put the egg salad back in the refrigerator. She closed the door, then leaned her hot forehead against it. Casey, why? You think Dad is telling us the truth? About what? About anything. I don't know, Casey said, shaking his head. Then his expression suddenly changed. There's one way to find out, he said, his eyes lighting up. Huh? What do you mean? Margaret pushed herself away from the refrigerator. The first chance we can get. The first time Dad is away. Casey whispered. Let's go back down in the basement and see for ourselves what Dad is doing.
Chapter 13.
Okay.
They got their chance the next afternoon when their father emerged from the basement, red metal tool chest in hand.
I promised Mr. Henry next door I'd help him install a new sink in his bathroom.
He explained, adjusting his Dodgers cap with his free hand. When are you coming back? Casey asked, glancing at Margaret. Not very subtle, Casey, Margaret thought, rolling her eyes.
It shouldn't take more than a couple of hours.
Dr. Brewer said. He disappeared out the kitchen door. They watched him cut through the hedges in the backyard and head to Mr. Henry's back door. It's now or never, Margaret said, glancing doubtfully at Casey. Think we can do this? She tried the door, locked as usual. No problem, Casey said, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. Go get a paper clip. I'll show you what my friend Kevin taught me last week.
Ew, what?
Ew.
I'm gonna pause for a second. What the fuck is going on outside?
Something was rattling the fence, but maybe it was a cat and whatever, it stopped happening.
I heard
So
nothing.
it's fine.
All I noticed is that everyone kept looking around while I was reading.
I heard nothing.
And I was like, wow, I'm really good
You
at
heard
reading.
nothing?
I heard nothing.
It
I saw
sounded
the-
like someone grabbed the fence and was like,
I saw the two
jingle,
of you
jingle.
look over there like, holy shit, and I was like, this is scary. But just for good measure, I'm gonna close the door.
You know, if I'm
Okay.
gonna die, at least it's for my art.
There you go.
It's not for your art. It's just near your art.
Well, I mean, as long as someone survives
It's
to
not
edit
like
this,
someone's like,
it's for my
Chris is
art.
podcasting. I must stop him.
I know.
It's probably a thing.
Rattle, rattle, rattle.
Or like an evil agent from the future.
An anal agent?
Evil.
Oh.
You hear what you want to hear, Jonathan. How many times we have to
Wow.
go over this?
Evil anal.
One and the same, right?
Is that code for watching the prequels?
Yeah.
Alright, that's
Yeah.
fucking scary.
I didn't hear anything. My headphones are still on.
It's probably a rat.
This is all getting recorded.
Hello.
Ba, ba, ba. It's that Chinese food delivery guy still. I have your food. It's cold.
Rat
just like-
in the city.
He was laughing with us. Okay. Sorry. We'll go back.
Alright.
Go back to Goosebumps.
I am literally getting goosebumps.
Good one, Johnson.
Margaret obediently found a paperclip on her desk and brought it to him like a good little girl. Casey straightened the clip out, then poked it into, the lock. In a few seconds, he humped a triumphant fanfare and pulled open the door.
Humped?
Yeah. No. Now you're an expert lockpicker, huh? Your friend Kevin is a good guy to know, Margaret said, shaking her head. Casey grinned and motioned for Margaret to go first. Okay, let's not think about it. Let's just do it, Margaret said, finally fulfilling her fantasy, summoning her courage and stepping onto the landing. A few seconds later, they were in the basement. Knowing very little of what to expect down here, it didn't make it any less frightening. They were hit immediately by a blast of steamy hot air.
Alright, this is gonna be an edit point.
This beer sucks. I'm glad I didn't get a six-pack of
So,
You guys get like a
blah.
just like a variety pack.
Yeah.
Just pick them up and yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah, I love them. They do single bottles.
How much are usually the single bottles? Like $2?
It depends. So these were probably like $1
Yeah,
or
minimum
something.
capacity.
One of the ones John got was like $4.
Oh, okay.
It's some fancy shit, but they're usually less than that.
okay, ready? The air, Margaret realized, was so wet, so thick, that droplets immediately clung to her skin. Oh, yeah. Squinting against the sudden bright light, they stopped in the doorway to the plant room. The plants seemed taller, thicker, more plentiful than the first time they had ventured down there. Long, sinewy tendrils drooped from thick yellow stalks. Broad green and yellow leaves bobbed and trembled, shimmering under the white light. Leaves slapped against each other, making a soft, wet sound. Oh, yeah. A fat tomato plopped to the ground. Jesus Christ. Oh my god. Let me do it. You're doing it wrong. I fucking hate
Wow. There's some very descriptive words.
It's still recording.
I know.
No.
Wait for
You
it.
didn't have to
fine.
do that.
Reading ahead.
Cheater.
Everything seemed to shimmer. The plants all seemed to quiver expectantly. They weren't standing still. They seemed to be reaching up, reaching out, quaking with energy as they grew.
Did he write romance novels? Because-
Long brown tendrils
Ew.
snaked along the dirt, wrapping themselves around other plants, around each other.
Ugh.
A bushy fern had grown to the ceiling, curved, and started its way back down again.
How very 70s.
None of that was ad-lib. Wow, Casey cried, impressed with this trembling, glistening jungle.
Wow.
Are all these plants really brand new? I guess so, Margaret said softly. They look prehistoric. That's how things look when they're brand new.
Yeah, trembling and quivering.
Prehistoric. They heard breathing sounds.
Fuck. Say it again, say it again.
Great. They heard breathing sounds, loud sighing, a low moan coming from the direction of the supply closet against the wall. A tendril suddenly swung out from a long stalk. Margaret pulled Casey back. Look out, don't get too close, she warned. I know, he said sharply, moving away from her. Don't grab me like that, you scared me. A tendril slid harmlessly to the dirt. Sorry, she said, squeezing his shoulder affectionately. It's just, well, you remember last time.
When your shirt was off.
I'll be careful, he said. Margaret shuddered. She heard breathing. Steady, quiet breathing. These plants are definitely not normal, she thought. She took a step back, letting her eyes roam over the amazing jungle of slithering, sighing plants. She was still staring at them when she heard Casey's terrified scream. Help! It's got me! It's got me!
$50 says he's joking.
Joking?
Joking.
Joking.
Okay, I just want to make sure. So I just read like an actual page. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can just
Yeah, whenever you get to the end of
because
that
it might
sentence
be
over there.
really good that I just want to keep going.
I know,
You-
yeah.
If you
Okay.
feel it, then just let it happen.
Okay. Margaret uttered a shriek of terror and spun away from the plants to find her brother. "Help!" Casey cried. Gripped with fear, Margaret took a few steps towards Casey, then saw the small gray creature scampering across the floor. She started to laugh. "Casey, it's a squirrel!" "What?" His voice was several octaves higher than normal. It grabbed my ankle and... "Look!" Margaret said, pointing. "It's a squirrel. Look how scared it is. It must have had run into you." "Oh?" Casey sighed. The color began to return to his ash gray face. "I thought it was a plant." "Right. A furry gray plant," Margaret said, shaking her head. Her heart was still thudding in her chest. "Sure gave me a scare, Casey." The squirrel stopped several yards away, turned, stood up on its hind legs,
What?
and started back at them,
What?
quivering all over.
I wasn't listening to any of that because I
squirrel.
just
A
read
squirrel.
the dumbest thing I've ever read in my
squirrel.
entire lifetime in an Instagram comments.
What was
Sorry.
it?
It's so much.
Oh, God.
It's so much that I don't even want to interrupt,
Okay.
but it was just mind blowing. What
close the
just
comments.
happened?
Hello.
What just happened?
It was a...
A
squirrel.
A squirrel.
A squirrel got him?
A squirrel got him.
All right.
Apparently.
Okay.
I lost $50.
Moving right along. How did a squirrel get down here? Casey demanded, his voice still shaky. Hold on, I'm gonna do a second read on that. How did a squirrel get down here?
That was more shaky.
Yeah.
I really wanted to ruin
It
that.
totally
I should've.
wasn't the exact
I
same
should've.
thing. Margaret shrugged. Squirrels are always getting in, she said. And remember that chipmunk we couldn't get rid of?
He stayed around
Do you
forever.
live in a barn?
Immediately in my head, their parents got him a pet chipmunk and they didn't want it. Like, just that whole story just rushed through my mind like I was downloading memories. Like, alright. Then she glanced over to the small ground level window at the top of the opposite wall. That window, it's open, she told Casey, because there's no one else in the room, and that had to be clarified. The squirrel must have climbed in
Well, she
over
wasn't
there.
talking to the squirrel.
Shoo! Casey yelled at the squirrel. He started to chase it. The squirrel's tail shot right up in the air, and then it took off, running through the tangled plants. Get out! Get out! Casey screamed. The terrified squirrel, with Casey in close pursuit, circled the plants twice. Then it headed to the far wall, leapt onto a carton, then onto a higher carton, then bounded out the open window.
How fascinating.
Casey stopped running and
Onto
stared up
another
at the
carton.
window.
A carton.
Good work, Margaret said. Now let's get out of here. We don't know what anything is. We have no idea what to look for, so we can't tell if Dad is telling the truth or not. She started toward the stairs, but stopped when she heard the bumping sound. Casey, did you hear that? She searched for her brother. But he was hidden by the thick leaves of the plants. Casey?
Yeah, I heard it. He answered, still out of view. It's coming from a supply closet. The loud thumping made Margaret shudder. It sounded to her exactly like someone banging on the closet wall. Casey, let's check it out, she said. No reply. The banging got louder. Casey! Casey! Oh, why wasn't he answering her? Casey, where are you? You're frightening me, Margaret called, moving closer to the shimmering plants. Another tomato plopped to the ground, so near her foot it made her jump. Despite the intense heat, she suddenly felt cold all over. Casey! Margaret. Come here. I found something. He finally said. He sounded uncertain and worried. She hurried around the plants and saw him standing in front of the work table beside the supply closet. The banging from the closet had stopped. Casey, what's the matter? You scared me, Margaret scolded. She stopped and leaned against the wooden work table.
Look, her brother said, holding up a dark, folded-up bundle. I found this, on the floor, shoved under this work table. Huh? What is it? Margaret asked. Casey unfolded it. It was a suit jacket.
What?
A blue suit jacket.
A blue jacket.
A red striped necktie was folded inside it. It's Mr. Martinez's, Casey said, squeezing the collar of the wrinkled jacket between his hands. It's his jacket and tie!
From the day before.
Margaret's mouth dropped open into a wide O of surprise.
Oh!
You mean he left it here? If he left it, why was it bundled up and shoved back under the table, Casey asked. Margaret stared at the jacket. She ran her hand over the silky striped tie. Did you see Mr. Martinez leave the house yesterday afternoon? Casey asked. No, Margaret answered, but he must have left. I mean, his car was gone. He didn't drive, remember? He told Dad he got a lift. This is all very interesting.
Good job, Earl.
Margaret raised her eyes from the wrinkled jacket to her brother's worried face. Casey, what are you saying? That Mr. Martinez didn't leave? That he was eaten by a plant or something? That's ridiculous.
That's a dot connect.
Then why were his coat and tie hidden like that? Casey demanded.
Maybe Dad was just doing his laundry. Maybe that's why Mom left. It's his gay lover.
Margaret didn't have a chance to respond. They both gasped as they heard footsteps from on the stairs. Someone was hurrying down to the basement.
Squeaky staircase.
Hi, Margaret whispered. Where? Casey asked, his eyes wide open with panic.
Oh, you can keep going.
No.
Yeah.
Read the next
Chapter
page.
15.
Chapter 15. Margaret leapt onto the cart and then pulled herself. It was so hard.
We're not going to take this seriously.
I'm sorry.
I really want to read this story from Instagram.
Oh my god. When we're done with
Okay,
Goosebumps,
I'll do this
one.
we'll
Okay.
end the
It's
podcast.
spam, but it's the most insane spam I've ever read.
I'm excited.
Okay, get ready. A tight squeeze, but struggled out into the grass.
What?
Then she turned around to help Casey. That squirrel turned around to be a friend, she thought, tugging her brother's arms as he scrambled out of the basement.
What?
It showed us the only escape route.
Oh my god.
The
That
afternoon
squirrels
air-
are genius.
Yes. The afternoon
to these
air
kids.
felt quite cool compared to the steamy basement. Breathing hard,
Don't be Annamarie with that whoopee cushion.
Yeah, only
both-
use it when the breathing.
Oh, no, he paused.
yeah, breathing hard, they both squatted down.
How can I not?
I know
I'm
you
doing
want to.
They squatted down to peer into the window. Who is it? Casey whispered. Margaret didn't have to answer. They both saw their father
dad.
stepped into the white light, his eyes searching the plant room. Why did Dad come back? Casey asked. Shh! Margaret held a finger to her lips, then whispered. I'm sorry. Then she climbed to her feet and pulled Casey toward the back door. Come on, hurry! The back door was
I
unlocked.
think that was whispered.
They stepped
understandable.
into the kitchen just after their father emerged from the basement, a concerned expression on his face. Hey! There you are, exclaimed.
This is a short chapter.
Well,
Okay. Hi, Dad, Margaret said, trying to sound casual. Why'd you come back? Had to get more tools, he answered, studying their faces. He eyed them suspiciously. Where were you two? Out in the backyard, Margaret said quickly. We came in when we heard the back door slam. Dr. Brewer scowled and shook his head. Shake, shake, shake. You never used to lie to me before, he said. I know you went down to the basement again. You left the door wide open. I don't know what I'm doing with that voice anymore.
I don't know, I love it.
We just wanted... Oh, I'm fucking up voices now. We just wanted to look. Casey said quickly, glancing at Margaret, his expression fearful. We found Mr. Martinez's jacket and tie, Margaret said. What happened to him, Dad? Huh? The question seemed to catch Dr. Brewer by surprise. Why did he leave his jacket and tie down there? I'm raising two Snoops, her father griped. Martinez got hot, okay? I have to keep the basement at a very high tropical temperature with lots of humidity. Martinez became uncomfortable. He removed his jacket and tie and put them down on the work table. Then he forgot them when he left.
A likely story.
Someone's taking a picture of the microphone.
It's okay, that doesn't show up.
You're not in it.
Oh.
You ruined it with your face.
Dr. Brewer chuckled.
You can come down.
I think he was in a state of shock from everything I showed him down there. It's no wonder he forgot his things. But I called Martinez this morning. I'm going to drive over and return his stuff when I finish at Mr. Henry's.
Who the fuck is Mr. Henry?
No idea.
Margaret saw a smile break out on Casey's face. She felt relieved too. It was good to know that Mr. Martinez was okay, and apparently just got hot like a normal person does and takes their clothes off in another person's house and then leaves their clothes there.
I do
Because
it all the
that's
time.
super normal. That's a super normal thing to do. How awful to suspect my own father of doing something terrible to someone, she thought, even though he's half plant. But she couldn't help herself. The fear returned every time she saw him.
I'd better get going.
Dr. Brewer said. Carrying the tools he had picked up, he started toward the back door. But he stopped at the end of the hall and turned around.
Don't go back in the basement, okay? It
We
really
almost said
could
the
be
title.
dangerous. You could be very sorry.
Margaret Margaret listened to the screen door slam behind him. Was that a warning or a threat? She wondered.
Ba ba ba